Hi everybody, Louise Plant here. And this week I'm not going to talk about information. I'm actually going to talk to you about my story because I feel that it would be a good thing for me to share my story with you. So, my story is like this. Basically, I was born in England, in Australia. My parents came out here on a £10 deal. And on this £10 deal, I was then born here. We were living in a farming community. And then from the farming community, I was here for about 3 years. My mother found it really hard living out here because farms in England to here are very different. So went back to England, and then from the age of 3 to 18, basically I was in England. And lots of things happened in there, and that's part of the reason for me telling you my story is because I'm feeling quite vulnerable today and I wanted to share that story. So my parents split up. My mother married another man when I was about 5, and he basically was an alcoholic pedophile. So I then lived a lot of my life in fear of living with a man that was actually very emotionally abusive, mentally abusive, and even physically abusive, which was quite a learning curve for me. And because of that, it basically led me to feel that that predominantly men were basically abusive. So it really led me to go on this path of pretty crazy things in my life. So I became involved with drugs. I was on LSD at 15. I started smoking pot at 17. I was a cigarette smoker from the age of 12. So I sort of bombarded my body quite heavily and quite extensively with a lot of abuse in my life. So whether it was physical, whether it was chemical toxins, whether it was emotional abuse, spiritual abuse, there was a lot of stuff that actually ended up happening to me. From there, I ended up going into, I had a number of relationships where men were physically violent with me. I've lived in domestic violence situations many times. And really through that phase, it's been a real phase of discovery. And I think what I've learned most out of that is the ability to rise above that, and part of the reason why connection is so important to me, because it is really the connection that you have with yourself as a person that allows you to grow and to connect with yourself and to connect with spirituality. So there were many pivotal points and changing points in my life. I got married. I've had 3 children. I do have 3 children to 3 different fathers. I just really went through a whole string of failed relationships, though predominantly long-term failing relationships, because I wasn't actually able to express what my needs were. I also didn't have any boundaries, so I wasn't aware of having any boundaries within myself. And the feelings that I had within myself were really quite huge feelings of self-loathing, self-destructive thoughts, suicidal, eating problems, just really lots of criticism, a lot of self-judgments, a lot of very destructive behaviour. So I'm telling my story because I suppose I don't think of it as being a big thing, but when I do actually tell people about my story, they sort of go, that's amazing. So I found solace in nature, I found solace in animals, I found solace spiritually, in just connecting to myself spiritually. And I also had to relearn many things in my life, and I had to relearn first to be able to assimilate the emotions that I was having. So I was very violent myself, and I've done things that I'm feeling, I do feel quite remorseful about. Living in England was quite different to living in Australia, so it was actually quite a violent environment where I was in. We were living in a London overspill town, and there were fights, being involved in fights. There were infidelities in relationships that led on to fights. And yeah, life was pretty crazy. There were times when I would be so off my head in whatever amount of drugs it was that I took, that it was just an escape, and I just really tried to escape from myself and to destroy myself in many, many ways. So through the healing process, what happens is that degree of self-destruction, that degree of self-loathing, that degree of self-hate basically just heals itself in layers. And there are some things that I've learned and experienced and done that have been part of that process, though sometimes the same primary things can keep coming up and up and up again and again. Had many years of counselling, did many years of therapy. Had a nervous breakdown at 21, basically just lost the plot. I just couldn't cope with anything. And then I spent about 6 years bumming around the world because I was so lost, hanging out in places, just not really doing anything. So, I had no goal, I had no vision, I had no mission, I didn't know where my home was, I didn't know where I was, and had that feeling of feeling really lost inside. So I do understand many things, and that's what makes the ability that I have to be a teacher and a therapist and a healer as being very good, because I've lived it with life experiences. I had sessions with counsellors and therapists where they just would look at me with their jaws dropping because they couldn't sometimes comprehend the craziness of what was going on. And it really led me on a journey to self-discovery, and a lot of people who go through quite traumatic childhoods or upbringing often tend to find themselves being in a space where with that comes healing. So the greatest cut is the greatest healing. I did some exercises once where I looked at all the shit things that happened in my life. I was raped twice, once at 18 and once at 21. And it was pretty hard because when I was 18, I thought that was normal. I thought that's how a man treats a woman. And I just sort of laid down there and waited for it to be over. So I learned to manipulate. I learned to be very hard on myself, and to some degree that still plays out in my life now, which is why I've spent, 20, 30 years. I've studied many things. I've done many courses because I was looking for a way to make myself feel good inside. And the reality is that no person can make me feel good inside. No qualification, no bit of paper, there's nothing that can make me feel good inside except for myself. So on the continual path of growing, and one thing as human beings that we have is the fact that we're always growing. There's always more to create and there's more to manifest. So it actually feels quite good being at a space in my life where I'm very much aware. And one thing that I am is very real. My coach said to me this week, she said, out of all the people on their spiritual journey, the thing that I really admire about you most is the fact that you're very real, that you are very real. Because to me, there's a difference between what feelings we have in our body and what, unresolved emotions and things that play out inside of our body are very much an indication of what we're attracting into our lives. So it's been an ongoing journey and an ongoing process of clearing the path to a point where I experienced an experience in May of this year, 2017, where I actually felt the God force coming through me. And when I say the word God, there's no religious context to it. Buddha, Allah, Muhammad, I don't really care what you want to call it. But that God force, the universal force coming through me was just amazing to actually feel myself connected to that and actually being able to mold that energy and to use that energy to manifest and create whatever it is that I'm creating. So this has led me to a point now in my life where I'm starting a new journey in my life in discovering and talking about the 7 laws, the 7 higher laws that we have in life to help us to stay on our track. And the therapy work that I do with people, it's really important, to look at keeping that channel within us, because I believe that we are a conduit. I believe that, the energy that flows through us is amazing once we can actually learn to tap into that and connect with that and start to use that to transform our lives to the better. So really the part of the reasoning behind this video is to let you know that my life has not been a perfect life, and I wouldn't change any of it, and I would go back and doing that because I know that there are contracts that I made at the time and these had to be played out and had to be sorted out. But the biggest thing is that I understand many things. And I know that when I was 21 and I went through my nervous breakdown, the thing that really was the hardest thing for me at the time was that I felt nobody understood. Like no one understood how I feel. And I can tell a lot of people out there, I do understand how you feel. Like I do understand what it's like living in fear. I do understand what it's like to be terrified. I do understand what it's like to be violated. Though, you know, there were periods in my life where there was so much rage within that because the internalized overwhelmingness of it all is just hugely overwhelming. Like it's hugely overwhelming. So, you know, not only can trauma be also quite debilitating, but so can other things that, you know, such as neglect can be very debilitating as well, and it can leave us almost paralyzed in fear. And it is just a process, and it is a process of working through things and working with things to a point where you can actually feel that feeling of freedom. I remember having a therapy once upon a time at some stage where a lady said to me that every tear that you cry will make you a tear lighter. And I remember thinking years and years later on, like, how many fucking more tears and how much fucking more lighter can you get? But there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and you can get to a point in your life where you just feel clear, where you feel just connected to yourself, and it's okay, like everything's okay. And then you can transforming that round to another place and another point in your life where you can actually start saying, okay, well, things are good, and now I'm going to make things start to work for me, and I'm going to start making my life work for me the way that I want to do it. And now that really excites me to see, you know, it's like you're molding the energy, you're changing the vibration, you're working with it, you're aligning to it emotionally, you're having that physical component lined up as well. So part of the work that I do is about the physical body, and it's really important to be able to be in your body, because I was a master at hiding, and I allowed myself to hide. So part of my journey now is about coming out. It's about getting out of the closet, getting out of, you know, hiding, and actually saying, here I am, this is my story, this is what's going on, and this is just who I am. So I have a mine of knowledge, I have a mine of information. You know, I'm a teacher and I'm a healer, and I'm very good at it. So if you want to find out more about the higher laws, just check out www.thehigherlaws.com, and there's workshops and events coming up about that all time, because having done my years and years of training and learned so much and the healing, like I know what works, I know what